I'm now heading north to an area where plantsmen made perhaps the biggest impact on the country's gardens, the Italian lakes, which lie up on the country's mountainous border with Switzerland and France. This is Lake Como, where the freshly kindled 19th century passion for plants combined with a surge of new exotic species to create some spectacular gardens. The dramatic alpine setting, purity of the air and the clarity of the light all combine to make this area feel distinctly different to the rest of Italy. In the early 19th century, it certainly chimed with the new Romantic movement and inspired poets such as Shelley and Wordsworth and composers like Verdi and Liszt. And at the same time, in the early 1800s, Como's shores were being transformed as wealthy Italians queued up to build lakeside villas. I'm taking a boat trip along Lake Como with Judith Wade.
Hello.
Judith founded the Grandi Giardini Italiani, which has helped and coordinated scores of Italy's finest historic gardens to open to the public. They are incredibly splendid villas.
Very ornate. All the gardens, of course, are waterfront and have been designed so that you can appreciate them from the waterfront rather than from the back of the city.
There are dozens of very impressive villas, aren't they? Just one after the other, all the way
I think
around.
they're more than 100.
Really, really. In recent years, many of Como's lavish villas have been bought by oligarchs, film stars, and super-rich fashion designers.
This used to belong to Versace, and
This
of
one
course,
here?
yes, and that's where
And does the garden run all the way down? Is that
all
all
the way
part-
down here.
Marvellous
And
garden.
I believe that Madonna and Shakira and all the people in the pop
Right.
world would turn up here often.
But what's this one here?
Mr. Clooney's place?
Uh-huh. Very beautiful. Yeah, I can see why I might want to live there.
Yes. This is Mr. Branson's home. It's rather particular, very beautifully kept, almost groomed. And Mr. Branson can only fly in here or come in here by boat because it has no access by road.
It is immaculately kept, isn't it?
And beautifully clipped cypress trees.
Does he spend much time there?
I really don't know. He's never invited me over, but
Has he not? How rude. How poorly.
And now we're coming along to Balbianello. But this is on a slope, so you couldn't make a proper Italian garden. Well, you come in here, you can look up the slope, and it looks as though it is a garden. There's a lot of topiary there. It's beautifully groomed and clipped. They take 4 months, just 2 men who've been there for the last 30 years. They're the same. Do you know they use scissors on it?
Do they? In the early 19th century, when many of these villas and their gardens were made, there was a burgeoning of colonial expansion and trade, which in turn created and fueled a craze for exotic new plants, both from the East and the Americas. The climate of the lakes, with its high rainfall, hot summers and surprisingly mild winters, was perfect for the new arrivals.
Everybody has lovely glass houses because they were plant collectors.
So they were bringing plants in. I mean, that was quite a new thing, wasn't it?
That was the fashion way through Europe at the time.
Yeah.
It was your status symbol. It wasn't having a Ferrari, it was buying rare plants. And then, of course, when Napoleon turned up, of course, there was a lot of boats going around Europe bringing plants in and out. That was an exciting part. He was going to exotic parts of the world.
And so with a mild climate and ericaceous soil, they could have plants from the Himalayas or China or wherever.
Bye, have a nice day.
Very much indeed. On the shore of the little village of Bellagio is Villa Melzi, which is one of Lake Como's finest gardens. At the turn of the 19th century, this garden started a bitter horticultural rivalry between two of Italy's most prominent men. Melzi was the home of Francesco Melzi d'Eril, a Milanese aristocrat, whom Napoleon appointed vice president of Italy after the French invasion. In 1808, he began to make his garden in the new English landscape style. And from the first, it was open to views of the lake and the mountains beyond. However, like all natural-looking gardens, this involved huge work to make and needs intensive maintenance to keep looking natural. When you first walk around the garden, it seems to just sort of be rather soft and like a country park. But actually, when you analyse it, the design has got really particular and strong elements. For a start, you've got this steep slope tied together by the immaculate grass and these sculpted, rather abstract forms, both of the shape of the land and also the shrubs, and then there's trees growing up, which give it some verticals. And then you have this path, this great long path, just running the whole length of the garden, and the series of the plane trees open to the lake. And it's a vast plain, this great horizontal expanse, which sets it all into balance. And I don't think that first part, the soft, abstract, sculptural bit, would work nearly so well without the severity of the lake. Directly across the water at Villa Carlotta lived Giambattista Sommariva, another highly ambitious politician. And Sommariva deeply resented Melzi for beating him to the top job, and there was no love lost between the neighbours. This fueled both men's gardens as they vied to outdo each other. Melzi appointed a botanist and started filling his garden with the latest plants from around the world. Sommariva followed suit, buying up more land to make room for his growing collection. Melzi fired a salvo of Rhododendron indicum, imported from Japan. Not to be outdone, Sommariva responded by planting hundreds of them. But Melzi wasn't going to take that lying down. He did his own exotic planting right on the waterfront. And Sommariva could see that across the water. It was like a horticultural bullet fired straight at him. Melzi upped the stakes and planted ever more trees and shrubs rarely seen in Italy at that time, but daily visible to Sommariva. For my money, it's Villa Melzi that wins this rather frantic gardening duel. Unlike Carlotta, it has a sweep and a line to it, and the inclusion of the landscape is clever and generous. But nevertheless, I can't help but notice that Melzi cited his greatest treasures where they would be admired by the maximum number of people. The garden here is planted with wonderful specimen trees, like cedar of Lebanon, and there's alcovas and all sorts of trees from all over the world. But none of them are the same as the trees on the wooded slopes. None of them are natives. And actually, if you look along the lake, you have this fine seam of exotic planting, like a strip of gold showing off people's wealth.